Hello and welcome, or welcome back if you're a returning viewer to the channel. WB here, and in this video what I want to do is show you how you can identify the Windows 11 requirements for deploying and installing Windows 11. This is all in anticipation of, well, the inevitable end of life of Windows 10 this year. As always, I ask, if you like what you see here, be sure to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell, like, share, comments are always welcome, and check out that description below for a link to our community Discord server so that we can continue this conversation. All right, everybody, let's go. Hello, everybody. In this demonstration, what I want to do is show you how you can identify the minimum requirements for Windows 11. Keep in mind this is going to be important in a deployment scenario, which is the main focus of this course, but it's also important if you happen to be taking any kind of certification exams, like, for instance, the MD 102 certification. That's the MS 365 Endpoint Administrator Associate certification, which does require you to understand, even though it's modern, a lot of modern deployment, understanding those basic requirements to deploy Windows 11. The other thing, if you happen to be taking something like, for instance, CompTIA's A+ certification, this has been required information for a very long time. I've been teaching it now for almost 15 years, and almost every version of the O2, regardless of what scenario you might be in, is required basic knowledge of those requirements to deploy Windows 11. And in this case, it's Windows 11 because it's the 1202 certification. Again, that's the A+, CompTIA A+ Core 2, 220 1202 exam, if I can think of what the current one is right now. This is because one of those requirements in the objectives is to know how to install and identify installation types of Windows 11. So it does require you to understand the different requirements and some of the features per edition too. So we're not going to go into the per edition features. We will talk about upgrade paths because that's going to be important, and with that upgrade path comes those considerations around what features are available. In this lesson or demonstration here for our Module 1, I want to show you a little bit about identifying and discussing the minimum requirements to get Windows installed. And you can use your lesson notes to find this URL. Keep in mind there's a lot of URLs for every lesson in every module throughout the entirety of the course, and I encourage you to utilize them to take your studies a little farther. So let's go ahead and let's dive into this demonstration. The first thing that we're going to do is kind of scroll down here, and I'm not going to read this to you. Again, Microsoft puts this up here for us, so utilize them as a resource, because when you need to know about vendor specifications and specificity, might as well go to the vendor themselves. Now, I do want to point out one thing. One of the things that you can do, and we've mentioned, is that you can do an in-place upgrade from Windows 10 to Windows 11. But notice something here. The device must be running, and this is really kind of an old version of Windows by now, but never say never, right? But I also want to make you aware of, and we're going to talk about it here coming up when it comes to the processor aspect, is that, yes, while you could be running this version, however, your upgrade, pay attention to this part, is contingent on having the appropriate hardware. Right? Because when this version came out, we were using and required to use the TPM Trusted Platform Module, 1.2, and it was supporting all the newest generation at that time Intel processors. While Intel, 8th, 9th, 10th, and honestly I'm on the cusp of it. I have a machine that had an 8th generation and has an 11th generation, but up to 10th generation Intel processors are no longer supported. So those are two scenarios when you look at the minimum requirements, and one of the things that you can do if you right-click on this little hyperlink here, you can automate and go through a couple of different things to find out about your Windows 10 device that you're considering upgrading. So I'm going to kind of skip over that, but I do want to make mention of that. Just because you have the appropriate version does not mean you have the appropriate hardware, right? So when we look at the processor, by today's standards, 1 gigahertz, pretty pretty lax on the requirements here. However, keep in mind, they are requiring 2 or more cores, and it does have to be a compatible 64-bit processor. This is something to keep in mind. We're talking about 64-bit editions of Windows 11, all right? And the other thing is SoC, or System on a Chip. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to choose Open in a new tab because I want to show you this. This can be a deal breaker with your devices, and you got to think about that in deployment here. So relatively new. This was updated in the November of last year. But what it does, if you scroll down here, it shows you, and we don't really care about all these older editions of Windows. Hopefully you took your motion sickness pills. I apologize ahead of time. But you can see what the supported Intel processors are and AMD processors. Keep in mind, Qualcomm processors are your ARM-based processors, so your ARM64 processors. It is important to keep this in mind because at a certain point, the hardware support for this has been dropping off. So you definitely want to be aware and make sure that you have the supported processor. Because again, it's not just like it was in Windows 10. It's not just anymore that you can just have a 1 gigahertz processor with 2 or more cores. No, now you have to pay attention closely to your current processor. Now, if you wanted to do that, one of the things that you can do is you can use MS Info. Let me go ahead. I'm going to push the start button here, and I can use MS Info 32, right? And if I want to find out about my processor information, let me go ahead. And we can see right here that this is the system summary, right? And notice that I can find out what my processor is right here. Notice the processor, it's telling me that this is 11th gen, right? I said I'm on the cusp here. It has 4 cores, it's hyper-threaded, so it has 8 logical processors, right? So that's important as well, too. And there's other things that we can utilize this for as well for some of the additional features. For instance, a hypervisor has been detected, means I can use the Hyper-V option too. We can also find additional information about your hardware right here as well too. You can see system type, 64-bit based PC. Right, so all important information that I want you to be aware of. I'm going to go ahead and close that down for now, right? So we've kind of identified what our processor requirements are. Here's where we start to see a little bit of an increase. And again, I know 4 gigabytes by today's environment doesn't seem like a lot, right? But when you have some devices out there that maybe have been around for a while and people have been used to running them on, maybe a little bit of a older version, or not an older, but been able to run that hardware on Windows 10 for a while, and maybe even prior to Windows 10, right? This is a little bit more strict than we've seen in the past, right? However, storage, and this is kind of interesting, right? 64 gigs. I know we have thumb drives and we have micro SD cards that are larger than that. I know our phones have 3 times that amount today. So, again, keep in mind. What I want to mention here before we go into any of the other stuff, actually, we'll keep going here, because I want to talk about when we say minimum requirements, what does that actually mean? All right, so storage, 64 gigabytes or larger, again, kind of the bare minimum, kind of almost laughable by today's day and age. But system firmware, here is something that's new. You are required to use the Unified Extensible Firmware interface. I know everybody will say UEFI BIOS. Okay, so let's be very, very careful with our terminology here, right? UEFI is the more modern firmware platform, the Unified Extensible Firmware Interface platform. That is the firmware platform you have to use, regardless of whether vendors or whether your IT tech friends call it, oh, it's a BIOS, UEFI. You make sure that it's UEFI because it does not support legacy BIOS. And another thing is, it has to have, and this is where the requirement for UEFI comes in, it has to have the secure boot capabilities, right? The secure boot capabilities leverage the Trusted Platform Module, or the TPM, and that TPM is what's going to store the cryptographic information about the boot state, the configuration state of that device. So it has to have this, and it's important to understand this. The other thing is an increase in the hardware requirements for the Trusted Platform Module. Now, remember the Trusted Platform Module, if you're not aware, that is the TPM, right? That is a cryptographic processor that stores cryptographic information. A lot of jargon, right? It's like a CPU that holds security information. And in this case, it works with Secure Boot to do a couple of things. One is it only stores trusted and digitally signed bootloaders, right? And it also keeps a track of the current configuration of the device, so you can also use the Trusted Platform Module for what is known as health attestation too. But minimum requirements, you have to have a TPM version 2.0, right, versus the earlier version of 1.1. Now, there is something you can do here in Windows. You can run tpm.msc, and when you run that, that's a little run line command that you can run in your Windows system, and you can see it right here. This is what's known as the TPM management console on the local computer. Right? This gives you the ability to see what the specification version is, right? So when I look at the specification version after opening the tpm.msc, Microsoft Management Console, I can see the specification version here is 2.0, right? And honestly, if I needed to do some TPM prep here, I could. I'm not going to do that because I've got a BitLocker encryption, and if I modify this TPM, I could lock myself out of my drive. So be very careful using that TPM management console. But it does give you the ability to just really quickly verify that your hardware supports 2.0. Again, remember, so far, two additional commands that I didn't put in the lesson, but we did put in the demo here is the fact that we have msinfo32.exe that allows you to open what's known as the system information utility to find out more information about your hardware under a summary. Remember, we also wanted to check to make sure not only that we had the capable firmware, but we also have the TPM, and that is with the tpm.msc. Runline command opens up that Microsoft Management Console. Now, next up is the graphics card. This has been a requirement for, going back, I want to say to the Vista or whatever. And it definitely didn't go back any farther because there was a different driver model back then. It was called the XPDM or the XP driver model. And when Vista came out, they moved to what's known as WDDM. The WDDM is the Windows Display Driver model, and what it did is it moved the graphics driver system here into user space, because one of the things they found out is that a lot of the times you were having blue screens inside of XP. It was because of drivers running, display drivers running in the kernel mode that would, kernel mode is a privileged system, runs in unified memory space, which means if there's corruption in one, there can be corruption in all, right? So they moved that out of kernel space and moved it into user space. So you need that WDDM driver 2.0. And again, DirectX is the graphics subsystem, right? Those of you that are gamers out there have heard of Xbox, right? Of course you have. I know it's a joke, but that's where that technology, Xbox uses that technology. When they released the Xbox, they didn't call it the DirectX box. They shortened it, and it's Xbox. But it's the same graphics technology that's used in those systems as well, too. And what you'll notice is that over time, that number's just incremented between the earlier versions of Windows going all the way back to Vista, which I'm trying to guess, I want to say was probably, I'm just taking a guess here, I might be wrong, DirectX 10 or so. Notice that there is a display requirement too. Display requirement is a minimum, but there are display requirements. Now, there are additional things here that you can see. I'm not going to worry about these, all right? Why? Because what we've talked about up until now are the minimum system requirements to deploy Windows 11. All right. I want you to remember, when I'm teaching, for instance, some of my CompTIA A+ students, I want you to keep in mind that this is the painful minimums to run Windows 11. All right. They're called the deal breakers. And why do I call them the deal breakers? Because anything less than this and you can't install Windows. So if you're going to take an exam, all right, specifically that O2 exam. Again, at the time of this recording, I don't know where you are in your studies, but it should be the 1202 exam. I want you to keep in mind, if they give you a scenario, a PBQ, and it gives you the minimum requirements, or actually the current requirements of the systems in a scenario, if you can memorize these system requirements, if those systems in that PBQ do not meet these minimums, you know exactly what you need to recommend to make them that way. Increase the RAM, increase the CPU, right? Got to be 64-bit. Got to have TPM. Got to have a TPM 2.0, right? Have that conversation with me, and you're going to be doing really good for those kind of exams as well, too. So this demonstration has been a little bit on how to identify those system requirements for Windows 11 in your deployments for Module 1.